I wasn't too alarmed since he was a familiar face. But I was too complacent. As Officer Johnson spoke, my heart rate shot up.
We're arresting your wife on fraud charges. We need to conduct an immediate investigation,
he said, pushing past me as I tried to stop him, insisting. Just a minute. He then made a serious declaration.
The victim claims they'll forgive if the stolen amount, $10,000, is returned. Can you cover it right now?
$10,000. That's impossible right now, I replied. Visibly unsatisfied, Johnson coldly announced.
Then we'll have to take your wife. We can't overlook someone sweet-talking and swindling money.
The more I heard, the more something felt off. Did my wife really commit fraud? She's been hospitalized for the past 2 years, I challenged.
What? I thought your wife worked at a major trading company,
he replied, his words fueling my suspicions. My name is Henry Smith, an employee on 30s. Although it's my prime working years, I've been unable to fully immerse myself in work. It's been a tough 2 years since my wife, Charlotte, fell ill and was hospitalized. I believe she'll get better, so I leave work on time to manage household chores and take care of our third-grader son, Lucas. Over time, I've gotten used to efficiently doing laundry, cooking, and helping Lucas with his homework. Despite occasionally working on weekends, I still manage to visit Charlotte with Lucas 2 or 3 times a month. Recently, though, something else has been troubling me. There's been some unsettling activity around our home. One evening, returning from the office, I noticed a man dressed as a police officer loitering nearby. Good evening. Are you on patrol? Did something happen? When I approached, he seemed surprised, not having noticed me. Apologizing for startling him, I inquired about the situation.
Actually, there have been a number of reports of suspicious people around here. Adults wearing sunglasses and masks are talking to children, so please be careful. If you see anyone suspicious, please contact us.
He said so as he put away his notebook with his photo and the name Johnson Miller written on it. According to what he said, there seems to be some disturbing people wandering around this area. As I was thinking, I need to be careful with Lucas when I get home, he left. I met the police earlier, and it seems like there's been some suspicious people wandering around lately, so you need to be careful. Back home, I cautioned Lucas about the recent suspicious activities. He responded absent-mindedly, his attention more on his homework, which worried me. He's starting to look more like a boy, but he's also starting to ignore what other people say, which makes me worried. Are you even listening? I asked, a bit frustrated. But then I remembered something else. Lucas, sorry. I forgot to shop grocery for dinner tonight. Go ahead and take your shower first. I'll go shopping now. As I grabbed a shopping bag.
Calm down, Dad.
Lucas chided.
I already went shopping, and you sorted the laundry wrong again. Please try to remember after one time.
Although people at work commend me for managing housework and childcare alone, it's actually Lucas who's more capable. It's thanks to him that we've managed without Charlotte. Without Mom, I'm just burdening you, I joked. When I said that playfully, he pressed his lips tightly together. His expression hardened.
It's fine, I'll keep helping around the house, but Mom needs to get better first. Even when she's back, I'll still help out.
He said so with tears in his eyes and a furrowed brow. He believes that Charlotte's illness and hospitalization are because he was a burden. Once, when we visited her in the hospital, the side effects of her medication made her terribly unwell. In front of Lucas, she kept vomiting. It was a tough day. Before her illness was diagnosed, she once told Lucas,
Mom gets sick when you're not a good boy.
Lucas had been scolded by her for saying that to him, so it seems that he is very conscious of that exchange. He's since vowed never to be a burden to his mother again. This weekend, let's visit Mom again. She's looking forward to seeing how much you've improved in your studies. Come on, let's finish dinner and get your homework done, I said cheerfully. Excited to see her, he happily helped with dinner preparations. A week flew by, and the day to visit Charlotte arrived. Lucas was in good spirits, suggesting,
Let's buy Mom's favorite cheesecake on our way.
I don't think she can eat heavy stuff, but if she can't, you can have it, I replied. We bought a popular cheesecake from a shop in our city and headed to her room. She looked relatively well that day, but something seemed to be weighing on her mind. While Lucas was in the restroom, I took the chance to ask her. It wasn't about her health, which was a relief, but the news was unsettling.
I've been getting silent calls. No one speaks, but I can tell the line is connected. Sometimes, it lasts for about 5 minutes.
She said. That's creepy. Actually, there's been a police officer patrolling our neighborhood, warning about a suspicious person. The world is becoming a dangerous place, I said. News reports and social media are full of bad news. I hope she gets better soon and we return to a peaceful life, but these days, worries never seem to end. Silent calls can be really distressing. Have you talked to the police yet? I asked.
I haven't, thinking it's not a direct threat and unlikely someone would harm me in the hospital.
She replied. What are you saying? It's too late if something happens. I'll talk to the officer patrolling our area. Our conversation ended as Lucas returned. We didn't want to burden him with our heavy talk, so we enjoyed the cheesecake and chatted. The following week, I returned home from work to find Officer Johnson on patrol. I was about to discuss the silent calls with him, but he was deep in conversation with Lucas. Officer, thanks for your hard work. Lucas, have you finished your homework?
Done long ago. Just got back from playing with friends.
Lucas replied. After nodding at his response, I faced Johnson. Sorry to bother you during your duty. I have something worrisome to discuss. Could you spare a moment?
Yes, sure. Do you have any problems?
It's comforting to have someone nearby to protect us, but I didn't want Lucas to overhear, especially with his concerns about Charlotte. Knowing about the silent calls would only add to his worries. Lucas, can you go home and heat up the items we bought? I asked.
No, I want to hear it.
He protested. It's nothing for you to worry about, get inside. I insisted. I asked him to warm up the side dishes I had bought, but he didn't listen. Sensing my intention, Johnson helped out.
Lucas, it's great you're helping at home. That's very responsible of you.
But he wasn't easily persuaded by such talk. As we were about to leave, Johnson said,
I'm around this area daily, so feel free to talk anytime.
I thanked him and waved goodbye with Lucas. Back home, during dinner, with his mouth full, Lucas said,
That officer is really nice, huh?
Yeah, protecting the town is tough work. We should be grateful. By the way, what were you two talking about before I arrived? Did he mention any new sightings? I casually asked, remembering their serious conversation. Lucas's reply clouded my mind.
He was asking about when you usually come home, when Mom will be back, and if anyone else lives with us. He mentioned there'd been a burglary around here.
I had never heard of such incidents in our neighborhood. He might be concerned about whether a young child like Lucas is living alone or if someone's supporting us. But feeling like our personal life was being snooped on didn't sit well with me. It'd be great if we could live without any incidents. And Lucas, don't go spilling our home info to just anyone. Be careful with what you share, I advised. Though Lucas didn't seem fully convinced, he replied,
Got it.
and I left it at that. About a month later, as I was preparing to visit Charlotte with Lucas, our doorbell rang. We rarely have visitors, so I wondered who it was. As I opened the door, there was Johnson.
Good morning, officer. What brings you here so early?
I greeted him. Seeing a familiar face in him, I wasn't overly alarmed by his visit, but I should have been more cautious. My heart rate spiked as he spoke.
Your wife is under arrest for fraud. We need to start the investigation right now.
After saying that, he forced his way into the house, pushing aside my attempts to stop him and saying,
Wait a minute. Can we talk about it? My son is here, so let's keep it at the door.
I whispered, hoping Lucas wouldn't hear. But Johnson ignored my request and marched into the living room. Then he made his serious declaration.
Your wife is suspected of a crime. The victim says if the stolen $10,000 is returned, they won't press charges. Can you cover it right now?
$10,000. Why would this happen? I can't pay that right now.
I muttered, bewildered. Between supporting us on a single income and Charlotte's medical expenses, our savings were almost gone. The savings, which were more than enough when my wife was working, were now almost depleted.
So I'll have to take your wife. We can't overlook someone manipulating and swindling money from vulnerable people,
he said. I felt a disconnect between this accusation and my image of her.
My wife, a fraudster. She's been hospitalized for 2 years.
I countered.
What? I thought she worked at a major trading company.
He replied, raising my suspicions. How did he know about Charlotte's former employer? Lucas wouldn't know to mention a trading company, and it had even become a joke that he couldn't accurately describe her job. It seemed unlikely that a police officer would know every local resident's occupation, and a quick check would reveal she's no longer employed.
Officer Johnson, may I see your badge again?
I asked. He visibly flustered at my request. By then, I was certain he wasn't a real cop, but I didn't want to risk a complaint. Especially when Lucas is around, keeping him safe was my top priority. Johnson quickly regained composure, asserting,
If your wife's not here, you'll have to come to the station. What's it gonna be? Come with me or settle with cash. Of course, I'll have to handcuff you.
Looking outside, no police car was in sight. His handcuffs seemed flimsy like something from a toy store. Paying wasn't an option, and who knows what would happen if I went with him. I grabbed my smartphone, feigning fear.
I have a relative who might help with the money. Can I check with them so that Lucas and I don't have to leave?
He hesitated, then nodded.
Fine, but make the call here. I can't let you plan an escape.
Thank you,
I said, opening my contacts app. I wanted to call the police, but he was watching me closely. Instead, I called a sharp-witted friend who's a lawyer. We kept in regular contact, and he was well aware of Charlotte's illness, often visiting her in the hospital.
Please, pick up.
I silently hoped. My prayers were answered as my friend answered the call after a few rings.
Sorry to bother you suddenly, but could you lend me $10,000? I promise to pay it back.
What's going on?
He asked, sounding worried. I continued.
Charlotte's been accused of defrauding an elderly person, claiming she tricked them out of money. If I can pay $10,000 right now, it seems we can settle it. Please.
Wait a minute, but she is.
He started.
I need your help. There's a cop in my house right now saying settling it is best.
He must have found it odd, but that was fine. Cutting him off, I continued, and he seemed to understand.
You're at home, right?
He reconfirmed and then said,
I'll transfer the money today. Just wait.
He hung up.
I've managed to sort out the money. I'll make the payment today.
I told Johnson, who nodded in satisfaction.
Then transfer it to the account I'm about to give you. Helping with things like this is risky for me, so once the payment is confirmed, I'll make myself scarce.
He handed me a note with the account details and headed for the door. As I opened it, a loud voice erupted from inside.
Mom would never do that. You're a liar.
Apparently heard everything. Lucas was glaring at Johnson, his shoulders heaving. He was initially taken aback by Lucas's fury but quickly regained composure, thinking he was just a child.
Lucas, I understand you want to believe that, but your mom's a criminal. If you do something wrong, you have to pay for it.
Triggered by the word criminal, Lucas lashed out even more.
Shut up. The real criminal is you. You're the one who's going to be arrested.
As Lucas made a scene at the door, curious neighbors began to gather. Soon enough, the crowd grew as word spread that police were involved. Panicking, Johnson tried to make a hasty retreat, but Lucas shouted,
He's a bad guy. Catch him.
Instantly, the bystanders grabbed Johnson to stop him. As he struggled, they restrained him more firmly. Then, a real police car arrived. Real officers were finally here. I felt relieved, but couldn't show weakness in front of Lucas, who was bravely standing up for what's right. I approached the newly arrived officer to explain the situation. After confirming my name, he said,
"We received a report from someone claiming to be your friend."
I recounted the story about the fraud accusation against Charlotte and a demand for money.
"That's not possible."
The officers shook their heads.
He was patrolling around our area and had a badge, so I never doubted him.
The police then took Johnson's fake badge. According to them, while the badge looked authentic, there was no one named Johnson in their department. It was a scam. Being led to the police car, Johnson was desperately resisting.
I was just following orders. I'm not the bad one. Besides, his wife works for a big company. She's rich. Rich people should give some money to the poor.
His selfish and misguided justification infuriated me. Before I could say anything, Lucas stood up to him.
My mom is fighting her illness in the hospital. My dad is working hard for her and me. Don't act like you're the only one suffering.
Shamed by Lucas, he fell silent. The gathered neighbors agreed with Lucas, applauding his courage. Unable to retort, he quietly got into the police car. My friend, who had called the police, had sensed something was seriously wrong from our phone call. He informed me that Johnson, using a fake name and impersonating a police officer, would likely face significant punishment. Later, the police also informed us that Johnson was involved in other cases as well. The silent calls to Charlotte were traced back to him, hinting at some sinister plan he had. Furthermore, it turns out that Johnson has a history of fraud, deceiving people for financial gain. He and his group had been running seminars, promising to invest money and increase it, but in reality, they hardly invested any of it. They only returned about 10% of the principal as so-called dividends, and later lied about losing it all in bad investments. Managing others' money requires a license, which of course, he didn't have. Plus, forging a police badge is also a crime. Johnson, who has committed so many crimes. Considering all of these, he's likely to face a severe sentence. My friend as a lawyer and the police agree that he must pay for his crimes. Most importantly, Lucas wasn't harmed.
The police and the neighbors praised you, saying you did great against the bad adult.
I told him. He stood up for what's right, fighting against a wrongdoer. As a parent, it was a nerve-wracking act, but I'm proud of his courage. Lucas, bashful about being praised, turned away with a flushed face, saying,
It's nothing. You knew Mom wouldn't do such things, right? Just like you believed.
He said.
Of course. I trust both Mom and you.
He smiled happily at my words. Despite everything that happened, I was relieved that it all ended well.
Have you finished your homework?
I asked Lucas, who suddenly widened his eyes and ran to his room.
Oh no, I have an assignment due tomorrow.
he exclaimed. I sighed, but I was also relieved that our normal life had returned. Later, the incident was briefly covered in the local newspaper. The headline read, "Elementary School Student's Courage Leads to Arrest of Criminal."
Mom, this is about me.
Lucas insisted on taking the newspaper to show Charlotte during her hospital visit. She already knew about it, and the hospital had various newspapers, including the local ones, but she acted surprised to humor Lucas.
Really? You did that, Lucas? I can hardly believe it.
Yes, it's true. Look, it says Lucas Smith right here.
Lucas pointed out, excitedly explaining it to her, who reacted with great surprise. Watching them, I shared the details with Charlotte. Lucas was really brave. He shouted, "My mom would never do that," and even scared the criminal.
You said that for me? You're grown up so much. Thank you.
She said, stroking his head. Lucas, with tears in his eyes, spoke softly. When she asked worriedly,
What's wrong?
Lucas said in a low voice,
I'll be good and do my best, so Mom, please get better soon. It's my fault you got sick.
Charlotte hugged him gently.
This illness isn't your fault. It's just a challenge that I'll surely overcome.
After saying that, she added as if she remembered something.
Come to think of it, I once said to you, if you don't be a good boy, your mother will get sick. That's not true, and I'm sorry for saying something so random.
Both Charlotte and Lucas had tears in their eyes as they embraced.
The doctors say I might be discharged soon if things keep going well. I'll keep fighting, so wait for me.
Charlotte said. Recently, she had been looking much better, and discharge seemed close, just as the doctors had mentioned. I prayed that it would come true. Months passed, and Charlotte's battle with her illness came to an end. Thanks to the doctor's hard work and her efforts, she returned to a normal life. Today was Lucas's school open day. It had been a long time since Charlotte and I went to see Lucas at school together.
He's really grown up.
Charlotte observed. Just as she said, Lucas stood confidently in front of the classmates. Today's school open day featured a theme about future dreams, where students presented essays they had written. I remember seeing Lucas revise his essays several times a few months ago. I usually check his homework, but he insisted on keeping this essay a secret until today.
My future dream is to become a police officer. I have caused a lot of trouble for my dad and mom in the past, but from now on, I won't be a burden anymore. I've been treated kindly by so many people, and I want to become a police officer to give back to them. I have many kind people around me, but I've also experienced that not everyone in the world is like that. I want to act to protect the important people in my life from such people. I've learned that becoming a police officer is not an easy task, but my mom taught me that every challenge can be overcome. She became seriously ill, but she fought hard and is getting better. I want to be an adult who doesn't give up in the face of difficulties, just like her. If anything happens, I will protect my dad and mom.
Listening to he speak passionately, we couldn't help but tear up. I vowed to myself to become a father capable of protecting my family. I'm Michael Johnson, 28 years old. I work for a major electronics manufacturer. As a mid-level employee, I'm dedicated to my work, but the reality is I'm constantly dealing with laid-back newcomers and struggling against unreasonable demands from clients. I work every day, growing more worn out by the minute. One day, after finishing my sales rounds, I stopped by a cafe to drink some coffee and write my report. It was past lunchtime, so the cafe was crowded with office workers. As I was looking around for an empty seat, I saw a woman doing the same. I blurted out without thinking, "Is that Ashley?" When I called out, the woman turned around. No doubt about it, it was my middle school classmate, Ashley Smith. She had grown up a lot since our school days. She still had her big, expressive eyes and an impressive figure, now a stunning career woman. She looked a bit surprised at first. But then she must have recognized me.
Michael! Wow, it's been so long.
She even remembered my name. I felt a warm rush in my heart. Her dimples when she smiled were just as I remembered from our student days. While we were chatting, a seat opened up right in front of us. I quickly suggested,
Since seating is scarce and you probably have more work, why don't we sit together?
thus, I reunited with my old classmate Ashley after 13 years. Here's a little secret. Ashley was my first crush. We met on the first day of middle school. I was captivated by her the moment I saw her. She had hair braided into pigtails and looked ordinary innocent. But even back then, she was so pretty that she turned heads. Luckily, I was always in the same group for presentation with her by chance. So we often talked even after the class. Much to the envy of the other guys, we both loved movies and would get really into our discussions about them. I never had the courage to confess my feelings, thinking she was out of my league. But I thought about inviting her to a movie. I can't count how many times I bought 2 tickets, hoping to go with her. But every time, I'd unfortunately see her being asked out by another guy. That made it hard to just casually offer her the ticket. In the end, I always ended up watching the movies twice by myself. Before long, she moved away because of her father's job. I never got to tell her how I felt, and my crush remained unrequited. Now, here she was, right in front of me. We talked about old memories, movies, and our current jobs. The conversation was so engaging that lunch break flew by. Reluctantly, I finally said, Ashley, can I get your contact information, and maybe give you mine? She nodded with a smile. We exchanged numbers and parted ways. A few months later, she was living in Colorado but occasionally came here for work. Whenever she did, she'd contact me, asking,
Hey, Michael, know any good spots around here?
I'd suggest restaurants and tourist spots I thought she'd like. And on my days off, I'd go to meet her. Ashley, in turn, would show me around places like Aspen and Denver Art Museum. I'm not bragging. I'm no handsome guy, average height and build, pretty sturdy. I haven't had much experience with romance. But I thought, maybe it's time to take a chance. So, I finally decided to confess my feelings to her. When she came to New York on a business trip, I asked her out for dinner. I approached the topic seriously.
Ashley, can you listen to me for a moment? The truth is, I've liked you since middle school. Even after 10 years, my feelings haven't changed. Will you consider being in a relationship with me, with the intention of marriage?
After saying so, I took out a small box and opened it in front of her.
I'm serious about being with you.
Indeed, I had prepared a gift for her beforehand. I thought an immediate ring might be too much, so I gave her a music box with preserved flowers inside. It looked like a box that might contain a ring, but when opened, it revealed flowers instead of a ring, a bit of a twist on expectations. I wondered how she would react. When I looked at her, she was teary-eyed. Then,
You're late, so late, Michael. I've been waiting for you to confess since middle school. You finally said it.
I was so surprised by her words that I nearly fell off my chair. She continued,
I've always liked your calm and kind nature, and how you treat everyone equally since middle school. I'm so lucky to hear that. Thank you very much.
She accepted my proposal by saying so. I was over the moon, trying hard to contain my excitement, and gently held her hand. That was the start of our long-distance relationship. Although we couldn't meet often due to busy work schedules, we stayed in touch daily through texting and video calls. I was more motivated than ever at work. I wanted to be a man worthy of her. I wanted to be someone who could support her. Those feelings drive kept me going. A year after we started dating, I decided to propose. The place I chose was Denver in Colorado. It was known for having the most beautiful night sky. We joined a stargazing tour, bundled up in many layers of clothing. We took a cable car to an elevation of 4,500 feet to view the stars. The sky was filled with countless twinkling stars. We were both speechless at the beauty. Ashley was moved to tears. While thinking that she is so charming, I took her hand firmly and said,
Ashley, marry me. I will always make you happy, no matter what.
When I said that, her eyes widened in surprise, then smiled.
Yes, please.
She replied and squeezed my hand in return. I was so happy that I hugged her tightly.
I will always protect you, forever.
I whispered. We talked about our future under the starry sky. Undoubtedly the most fulfilling time of my life. After the holiday, I took her back to her family in Colorado and returned to New York. Now, let's start preparing for our wedding. I was excited, but then an unexpected event dramatically changed our lives. I returned from the trip and tried contacting Ashley as usual. But there was no response. Calls, texts, Skype, nothing worked. No reply. It had never happened before. A week had almost passed without any reply from her. When I got a call from an unknown number, in a rush, I answered the phone. It was Ashley's father. Out of the blue, he said.
I apologize for this sudden call. I am aware that you and Ashley are engaged, but I must ask if we can pretend this never happened.
It was a unilateral request to break off our engagement. I was in disbelief and managed to say,
This is so sudden, I don't understand. Can I at least talk to her directly?
Despite my insistence, he was just saying,
Please don't ask about the details. This is all we can tell you. I'm sorry, but the engagement must be as if it never happened.
He kept insisting on annulling the engagement, wondering what could have happened to her in such a short time. I was utterly confused and distressed. Unable to stay put, I asked my boss for a leave. I immediately boarded a plane bound for Colorado, where she lived. It was already dark when I reached her house and rang the doorbell. A woman, tired-looking and resembling Ashley, answered the door. Probably her mother. Apologizing for the sudden visit, I pleaded.
I'm Michael, dating Ashley. I desperately need to speak with her. Please.
I begged in order to see her. To my surprise, her mother started crying. Then her father, who must have heard my voice, appeared at the door. He looked startled to see me.
I'm sorry for the rude call yesterday. Weren't you working today? I feel bad you came all this way,
he said, and then let me into their home. I looked around nervously, but Ashley was nowhere in the living room. Her parents served me coffee. Reluctantly began.
About what happened last week?
They hesitated before revealing.
Please don't be shocked. Last week, on her way home, Ashley was involved in a car accident. She hit her head badly and was unconscious for 3 days. She's awake now, but she doesn't remember you.
Ashley with amnesia, forgetting everything about us. Her father, tears in his eyes, continued.
I'm terribly sorry, especially since you were engaged. But since she doesn't remember you, I don't think she can continue the relationship.
Her mother added.
She's in a state of panic about not remembering. The doctors advised against forcing her to recall her past as it might be too stressful.
Her mother explained this to me, tears streaming down her face. Despite that, I persisted.
I don't mind if she doesn't remember me. I just want to see her as she is now.
Her parents understood my feelings, but were hesitant to let me see her, considering her mental state. It seems that the parents are also quite patient with this situation. Clearly, this was taking a toll on them too. However, moved by my determination, they finally agreed to let me meet her, provided I didn't upset her. We headed to the hospital together. Knocking on the door of her room and I entered. I saw her sitting on the bed. Her head wrapped in bandages and her gaze was completely different from before. "Who is this person?" almost as if she was asking. Her mother said, trying to ease the tension, "He's a friend of ours." Her anxious expression softened slightly. I gently introduced myself.
"Nice to meet you. I'm Michael, a friend of your parents."
I was careful not to arouse any suspicion while talking to her. I continued visiting her every weekend. Initially posing as a friend of her parents, she was puzzled why a friend would visit so frequently, but I lied about being able to provide simple counseling. Eventually, I suggested we just have casual conversations to ease her mind. The deception weighed on me. My true intention was to ease her discomfort. Therefore, I started studying psychology in my spare time, attending a school and learning on my own. Of course, I wasn't expecting to be able to provide professional counseling. But my sole aim was to be as close to her as possible. During these days, she found me calming, even though she thought I was a stranger. I heard from her mother that, even if Ashley couldn't remember me, I knew well what she liked. After her discharge, I visited her every weekend at her home, bringing DVDs of movies she used to love. Gradually, we became more comfortable with each other. About a year later, I made a request to her parents.
"Please, let me propose to Ashley again. I love her just as much, even with her lost memory."
I was expecting opposition. But her parents, now trusting me, happily agreed. So, I took her back to Denver. She seemed really happy on the drive, a nice change of scenery for her. While guiding her to a spot with a clear view of the stars, I was once again captivated by the star-filled sky. She was innocently looking through stained glass, overwhelmed.
"Ashley, marry me. I will always make you happy."
I blurted out, then held her hand tightly. She looked at me, wide-eyed, froze for about 15 seconds. Unable to bear the silence, I called her name. "Ashley." Then, suddenly, she began to cry, in tears.
"I'm sorry,"
she whispered. I thought I had rushed things, and apologized to her.
"Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. Forget what I just said."
But she shook her head vehemently.
"No, it's not that.
I was confused, standing there when she continued.
My memory. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused."
Astonishingly, she remembered last year's proposal at the same spot. My words and the touch of my hand. Same experience as 1 year ago triggered a flashback of her memory. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I turned away, trying to compose myself. Then she hugged me from behind.
"Thank you. And I'm sorry for worrying you. You really did keep your promise to always protect me."
It had been a tough year for both of us. But at that moment, light finally shone on our future together. When we returned to her home, her parents were overjoyed to hear that her memory had returned. They thanked me tearfully.
"We don't know how to thank you enough for leading Ashley back to us."
Ashley and I were both moved to tears. We reaffirmed our intention to marry and her parents gave their blessing. Soon after, we planned a wedding in a chapel in Aspen, with the approval of both our families. It seems we'll have a long-distance marriage between New York and Colorado for a while, until Ashley fully recovers. But I feel incredibly happy. Just having her safe and by my side. That makes my life complete.